The day my husband handed me divorce papers, he was smiling. Not the smile I had fallen in love with 12 years ago. A different one. The kind that belongs to someone who believes they have already won. He slid the papers across the kitchen table like he was doing me a favor, and said, "Sign these, and you can keep the car." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I picked up the pen, and I signed. What Marcus did not know, what he could not have known, was that 48 hours later, everything he had spent a decade building was going to belong to me, and I had been planning it for 3 years. My name is Diane, and this is the story of how I lost a marriage and gained everything that mattered. I met Marcus when I was 26. He was 31, already running a mid-sized logistics company. His father had left him, confident in the way that men are confident, when they have never had a real reason not to be. He was charming and decisive, and when he focused his attention on you, it felt like standing in a beam of light. I was working as a financial analyst at the time. I was good at my job. I understood numbers the way some people understand music, intuitively and completely, hearing things in them that other people missed. Marcus noticed that about me early on. It was one of the things he said he loved. In the beginning, we got married after 2 years of dating. A big wedding, his family's choice, his family's guest list, his family's idea of what a celebration should look like. I wore a dress I had picked out alone, because his mother had opinions about everything, and I had learned early that the path of least resistance with Eleanor was to present her with a fait accompli rather than an opportunity to redirect. I smiled through the whole day. I was genuinely happy. I loved Marcus. I believed in what we were building. For the first 4 years, the marriage was good. Not perfect, but real. We worked hard, traveled when we could, talked about the future in the specific way that people talk about it, when they believe they are moving towards something together. I had stepped back from my career to help Marcus with the company, partly because he needed the help, and partly because I was good at it and I found the work genuinely interesting. I restructured his accounting systems in the first year and saved the company enough money that Marcus took me to dinner at the nicest restaurant in the city and told me I was the best thing that had ever happened to the business. I should have noticed even then that he said the business rather than him. The shift happened gradually, the way important things usually do. As the company grew, Marcus grew with it in ways that were not entirely good. Success confirmed things in him that I would have preferred to see questioned. He became less interested in my opinions and more interested in my agreement. He began making decisions without consulting me, then explaining them to me afterward, in a tone that suggested explanation was a courtesy rather than a conversation. He started spending more time with a circle of advisors who thought about money the way predators think about prey, and who had very clear ideas about what a man in Marcus's position should want from his life. I was not part of those ideas. I noticed things, small things first, then larger ones. A dinner he forgot to mention, a weekend trip that was explained to me after it was booked, a woman named Tessa who appeared in his schedule with increasing frequency under the label of business development, who, when I met her at a company event, shook my hand with the specific confidence of someone who knows something you do not. I did not confront him. I watched. By the time I was certain about Tessa, I had already been thinking for over a year about what came next. Not out of bitterness, not yet, but out of the cold analytical clarity that had always been my sharpest tool. I could see the shape of what Marcus was building, and I understood that I was not in it. And I understood something else, something more important. I had spent 6 years building his company alongside him. I knew it better than anyone. That trust was the most expensive mistake he ever made. I spent the next 18 months working quietly and carefully. I kept doing my job, kept managing the finances, kept being the steady and competent presence Marcus had come to take entirely for granted. But I was also doing other things. I was talking to people. I was building relationships with three of the company's largest clients, relationships that were professional and genuine, and that over time became the kind where a phone call from me carried weight. I was consulting quietly with an attorney who specialized in business law, and who helped me understand exactly what my legal position was, and exactly what it could become. And I was watching the company's books with a new and very specific kind of attention. What I found was not illegal. Marcus had not stolen anything. But what I found was a pattern of decisions over the previous 2 years that had quietly and significantly undermined the company's core value, in ways that were not yet visible on the surface, but that I knew, with complete certainty, would become visible within 18 months. He had overextended on 3 contracts, taken on debt to fund expansion in a market that was softening, and restructured 2 key supplier relationships in ways that saved money short-term but created fragility that was going to be very expensive. The company looked healthy. It was not. I documented all of it, carefully, thoroughly, with the same precision I had always brought to the numbers. Then I waited for Marcus to make his move. He made it on a Tuesday in March. The divorce papers were prepared by an attorney I had never met, which told me he had been planning this longer than I had realized, which told me things about the marriage I had not let myself fully know. He presented them to me at the kitchen table, smiling that smile, and told me I could keep the car. I signed. I said very little. I went to bed that night and I slept well for the first time in months. The next morning I made 3 phone calls. The first was to the attorney I had been working with for 18 months. The second was to the largest of the company's 3 major clients, a man named Robert Chen, who had known me longer than he had known Marcus, and who had been growing quietly concerned about the direction of the company, for reasons he had shared with me in confidence over several conversations. I told Robert what I knew about the company's financial position. He was not surprised. He told me he had been considering moving his business elsewhere, and that he had stayed partly because of his confidence in me. I told him I was going to be making some changes, and asked him to hold his decision for 60 days. The third was to a private equity contact I had cultivated carefully. Over the previous year, a woman named Sandra who ran a fund that specialized in acquiring undervalued logistics companies and turning them around. I told Sandra everything. The vulnerabilities, the overextension, the supplier fragility. I told her the company was going to look significantly less healthy in 12 to 18 months than it looked today, and I told her that I was in a position to facilitate an acquisition at a price that would look generous now and would look like a bargain later. Sandra asked me why I was bringing this to her. I told her the truth. I told her that I had spent 6 years building that company, and that a man who underestimated me was about to discover what that meant. She laughed. Then she said she was interested. The acquisition process took 11 weeks. It was complex and it required navigating the divorce proceedings simultaneously, which my attorney managed with a precision I found genuinely impressive. Marcus's legal team was focused on the asset division and did not fully understand what they were looking at when the company's valuation came up, partly because the valuation was accurate, and partly because the vulnerabilities I had identified were not yet visible in the standard metrics. They negotiated hard on the real estate and the personal accounts. They did not negotiate hard enough on the business. The acquisition closed on a Friday. Sandra's fund purchased a controlling interest in the company at a price that was fair based on what the company appeared to be worth. The deal included a restructuring plan and a new operational leadership structure. I was named Chief Operating Officer. Marcus found out on a Monday morning when he arrived at the office and was met by Sandra's representative, who introduced himself and explained the new ownership structure and handed Marcus a revised employment contract that reflected his new position as a non-executive consultant with a substantially reduced role. I was not there for that conversation. I did not need to be. What I was told by someone who was there was that Marcus sat down very slowly when he understood what had happened. that he asked several questions, each one quieter than the last, that at some point he said my name, not as a question, just my name, in the specific tone of someone who has just finished putting together a picture they should have seen much earlier. I started my first day as COO on a Wednesday. The office was the same office I had worked in for 6 years. The same desk, the same view, the same people I had worked alongside through all of it. What was different was everything else. Robert Chen renewed his contract that week, longer term, and at expanded scope. The supplier relationships I had identified as fragile were restructured. Over the following quarter, the overextended contracts were carefully renegotiated. Within 8 months, the company's actual financial health matched its apparent financial health for the first time in 2 years, and it was doing so under my name. Marcus left the company 6 months after the acquisition. I do not know exactly where he went. I heard he started something new. I hope it goes well for him. I mean that without irony and without warmth. He is simply someone I used to know. Tessa, I understand, did not stay long after Marcus's circumstances changed. I am not surprised by that either. What I think about now is not Marcus. What I think about is the woman who sat at a kitchen table in March and picked up a pen and signed her name and felt, underneath the grief and the anger and the exhaustion, something else. A very specific and very quiet kind of readiness. I had spent 6 years making myself indispensable to something that did not value me. I had let that happen because I loved someone, and love makes you willing to be underestimated. But I had also spent 3 of those years paying very close attention. And paying attention, it turns out, is its own kind of power. Marcus gave me divorce papers and kept the smile for himself. I kept the company. If you are watching this and someone in your life has decided you are the smaller piece of the equation, I want you to hear something. The most dangerous thing you can be is competent and underestimated at the same time. Do not correct the underestimation. Let it stand. Let them keep it. And keep building. The moment they realize what happened will be worth every quiet day that came before it. My name is Diane. He kept the smile. I kept everything else. Tell me in the comments whether you have ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better. I want to hear your story. Subscribe for more. I will see you in the next one.